the director of the facility came and sat me down and said that I had been asking a lot of questions of his staff, and they had been talking about this, and he decided that I needed to trust the process or leave. And I was not okay with that. Like, to me, I wanted answers to my questions if I'm making life-altering decisions on how I'm going to eat in order to address my cancer.
Welcome to Your Journey to Joy podcast. I'm your host, Moyra Gorski, and I'm on a mission to help you find joy in the chaos of life. As a retired nurse, multi-passionate entrepreneur, and mom of 4 adult children, I know what it's like to feel the overwhelm of it all and wonder if and when the joy will show up again. And I've learned it's up to us to go find that joy. On this show, you will hear inspiring stories from those who have overcome all kinds of life challenges, tips on how to stay healthy and vibrant during the ups and downs of life, and simple ways on finding joy in your own life. Let's face it, life is messy, yet when we travel together on this journey, support and encourage each other along the way, that joy starts to show up again. I'm so excited to lead you on this journey of you to find the joyful life that you deserve. Well, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Moyra Gorski, and we are all about talking about your journey to joy. We're talking about overcoming challenges. And if you've listened to my podcast in the last several months, you know that cancer called my name at the beginning of October, and I've been on this journey of learning and overcoming that and sharing that all with you. So today I'm completely thrilled to bring a guest to you who is an expert in one of the books that I found that one of my girlfriends told me about when I first was diagnosed, called The Metabolic Approaches to Cancer. And we're going to dive into that. We're going to talk about what all of that means. But first, I want to, again, introduce you to Katrina Foe. She's a functional nutritionist specializing in cancer. And I am just thrilled that the universe brought us together, I think through social media, which often that's the way it happens. But Katrina, thank you for being here today and welcome to my podcast.
Oh, it's a delight to be here. Excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I always start with my guests and just asking about what their story is and sharing with us, because many times I know with my own situation, as well as many that I've interviewed, is that we have something that happened in our lives. And as we get through it, as we learn through that, we want to share that with other people and share it. We learn about it. We also teach that, we teach what we learn. So I'd love to hear your story, your backstory, and how it brought you to what you're doing today and helping those in this wellness, functional medicine, side of things with cancer.
Absolutely. Yes, I see the same thing. Usually practitioners come into this quite often because of their own journey. And that was the case for me. So I had already been on a learning that food is medicine kind of journey with some of my kids and different tooth issues. And I felt like I was doing all the right things. I mean, we were pretty extreme. We were eating 100% organic, very clean, to the point where we had moved to a different state so we could raise our own meat animals, making our own toiletries, cleaning products, all the stuff. And I'm a little like go big or go home kind of girl. So it was full throttle. And when I had a mastitis and I was nursing my 5th baby, and I knew all the stuff to do, got it to go away, and there was still a huge golf ball size lump. And I'm not a very well endowed woman, and so it was very obvious. And honestly, I didn't think that much of it. Breast tissue shifts as you're nursing. I just had a plug duct mastitis, and it was my mother that actually kind of pushed me like, no, you need to get this checked out. And then this crazy story that my grandma had a double mastectomy, but she wasn't sure she had cancer, came out. And I'm like, how do you not know? But I guess back then they didn't talk about it as much. And so from the best we can figure out, she had cancer, because why else would you have a double mastectomy? But so this motivated me, and I went and did a lot of research. I like to dig into the why and started looking into things. And when I came back that it was cancer, I had already I knew I wasn't looking for what standard of care was offering. Now, this isn't to say that that's bad or there isn't a time and a place, but for me, it wasn't the right choice and where I was feeling led. So I did not want to miss anything. I felt very strongly that there was a reason this happened and that something I was doing was not right. So I didn't want my bias or what I had learned in the past to affect it. So I put everything on the table. And this was hard for me because I had very strong convictions about food, even at that point. And so I dug in. Let's see both sides of the story. And I think this is important because I think a lot of us have something we've heard or learned, and whatever it is, the first thing, like that's our dogma. That's what we attach ourselves to. And sometimes we're not always open to hearing the other side. And this is just really common, whatever we're talking about, right? So I went down to a Gerson clinic, vegan, lots of coffee enemas, set of supplements for everybody. They were doing some other additional things like IV vitamin C that's not classical Gerson. But I'm like, okay, let's experience this. Let's understand who else to get better answers from than the experts. I read some books, but I still had a lot of questions. And by the third day, the director of the facility came and sat me down and said that I had been asking a lot of questions of his staff, and they had been talking about this. And he decided that I needed to trust the process or leave. And I was not okay with that. Like, to me, I wanted answers to my questions if I'm making life-altering decisions on how I'm going to eat in order to address my cancer. And they couldn't tell me why I can't have salt, why I can't have fat, or very, very little fat, why they're putting me on a thyroid glandular medication when they did not know, they hadn't tested my thyroid. Like, there were all these questions that I did not understand the answers to. They were giving me very high dose iodine, but they hadn't checked for Hashimoto's, all these things. But I got kicked out of the cancer clinics.
Oh. Sorry.
So, no, it's ridiculous.
I never heard of anybody kicked out of a clinic.
Thank you. This is how I felt. And I felt kind of like the bottom had dropped out because I felt like I was going to get answers there. And with more research, I'm absolutely grateful that I got kicked out because that would have been the worst thing for me with my body now that I've learned what I've learned. And long story short, I searched around and somebody connected me to a functional medicine practitioner that pretty much does what I do today, although we have some cooler, newer tests available. And we started on the path of testing everything. And I have to tell you, I had not done any testing ever before, like none. And I just assumed if I took vitamin D, my vitamin D levels went up. I just assumed that, I did these protocols and ate less of this or that or more of that I got the nutrients that was on the nutrition label. And I didn't realize the effect of all these things that I wasn't looking at and testing. I also had no idea the amount. I knew there were a lot of toxins, but I didn't really realize the amount of toxins in our environment. And that, if you have genetic susceptibility, bad detox pathways and such, it makes it harder to get rid of it. And then you layer on a bunch of pregnancies that, are competing with your body's resources. So there was a lot of stuff that I literally had no symptoms of. Because when I was diagnosed, again, I was doing all the stuff and I was tired. I had some extra pounds, I had lost a little hair, but I just had a baby. I just had 5 babies. Like,
right.
That wasn't,
yeah. I talk with
for that.
Yeah, I talk with people in my wellness business about postnatal depletion and depression and how there's so much that, your baby takes so much and we get so depleted and so many women don't. Just, again, in a general wellness, women just don't even think about that and realize how much of a stress that is on your body.
Yeah, as Americans, we don't look at women getting married at how they need to really shore things up. And then we don't worry about it in between or after or any of this stuff. It's like there's this idea that I'm a cooler, better person if I just dig in and suck it up and keep going as a mom. And, you have to put your own air mask on first, is what I've learned. So
absolutely. And to be clear, so you were choosing, you didn't do any conventional, you just went deep into the other side, if you will, the alternative, and didn't go to the doctor and say, okay, let's, get this out and then I'm going to learn. You just started learning first. Yeah.
Yeah. I really already had the mindset of let's look at the root cause. Why is this happening? And I don't know where I got this from, but I really felt like there was a reason why cancers were there. So I mean, I'd already done a lot of research. I love reading health books and podcasts and, digging into research and stuff. So that was already there. But no, I didn't do any surgery, any chemo, any radiation, and anything, which again is not the only way to do it. I'm not saying everyone should do it that way. There's a time and a place for those things. And quite honestly, some people just because of how they've grown up and the dogmas in their head, like need to do that mentally. But I really want to get it out there that you don't have to have symptoms. You don't have to be a certain age or have, all these things going on, eating McDonald's. It's not like that. I'd say 95% of my clients are middle-aged moms that do all the health stuff. And when we dig in, there's reasons, but they weren't feeling it. And that's what I think people are surprised about over and over and over again, that you can have all this. So,
well, and there was no doubt that when people learned about my diagnosis, myself included, they were all shocked. Like, wait a minute, like you do all the right things. Like you're doing everything right. You eat well, like you take all these supplements that you promote and sell, and like everything's right in your world, which now nobody's perfect. And I said, there's always room for improvement. And again, I'm the same way. Like when something shows up like this, it's telling us, our body's telling us that something isn't working. And many times we do have, a symptom that it's a pain or we can't sleep or we have digestive issues or whatever, but it doesn't always, our body's a pretty amazing, thing. And so it can really handle a lot before it can't handle it. And then sometimes that's, when the big surprises happen. But yeah.
Yeah. So I addressed all the issues that were going on. So at this point, I addressed all the issues, resolved the cancer. My body broke down and eliminated the tumor 100% on its own, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
And I never had to lose my hair or anything, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of protocols. It was a lot of changing the way I eat and lifestyle. And I mean, literally, it was like a full-time job of all the stuff I was doing. So I don't want to minimize that. It's not easy. A lot of times I think people think with the alternative therapies, it's easy, and it's not, but it was effective. And, I'm, like 8 years out now and no issues. I'm still monitoring all my different functional labs, and I've done some different additional testing as well. But there's power in knowing why you got cancer, because again, a lot of the stuff you can't see. So for me, I was very insulin resistant. Doesn't feel bad to have high blood sugar, people. This is the thing I didn't realize. I was very estrogen dominant, hypothyroid. I had a lot of stress. I had just moved to a different state, lost my whole friend support the year prior. And of course, I had 5 babies, and I think the oldest was like 6. So there's a little stress. Environmental toxins. I didn't realize that we had moved into a house 8 months prior to the diagnosis that had black mold, like super high levels of toxic black mold. I didn't realize. And now as a practitioner, I look back, I run mold panels on every single client. It's not a question. It's not like, let's look at the symptoms. And I have only had one cancer client that hasn't had high levels of mold. I mean, this is a huge thing. I mean, we know they're carcinogenic and no one's talking about, let's look at this, because you don't have to have symptoms. Usually we hear mold and we talk about the symptoms. It's not always a thing. I had crappy genes. I don't methylate well. I don't convert vitamin D pretty much at all. I have terrible detox pathways, insulin sensitivity, all sorts of different things going on there, which are able to be adjusted epigenetically with the diet and lifestyle choices. So it's not a bad thing. It's just good to know. It's power. I had a lot of inflammation, very, very low vitamin D levels, of course, with the genetics. And then there was this very toxic relationship that I was in that I didn't realize that how much the emotions actually play in on developing cancer. But I mean, honestly, all chronic disease, that our emotions are stored physically in our body, and you have to, learn how to release that. It's a huge issue. And most people just kind of push that to the side and say, oh, I'll deal with that another day, right?
Right, right. Well, and so let's stop here and say, because you just listed a bunch of things. And so that's what I want to spend the majority of our time talking about is, again, I was introduced to this book called The Metabolic Approaches to Cancer, and you're an expert on that. And you pretty much, well, and so for our audience, basically, I'll just do this in simple terms. What the book addresses is says, okay, we have certain terrains within our body. And when we develop cancer, something in those terrains, one, both, all, I mean, you listed several of them, but we'll talk about what the terrains are, that something's off in there. And so it's not just about the tumor, it's what's happening underneath in the terrain in our bodies with insulin. And again, we're going to go through all of that. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically if you correct the terrains and if you improve that, what's going on in your terrains, you can prevent that cancer from occurring. You can improve your chances, or you can heal the cancer, that kind of thing. And when I found that book, it was like this, like, I was like, that's it. I mean, I've been promoting that way of thinking for more than 25 years with my wellness business. I'm a nurse. I worked in nursing, and that's the Band-Aid approach, and like looking at, here's the medicine, here's the Band-Aid. But I've been talking about, okay, well, you can't sleep. Let's talk about what's going on in your life that you can't sleep. How are you eating? How's your digestion? What's your stress level? It's not about this can't sleep. There's something underlying. And that's what I love about that book and that approach, is that there's something underlying. And for me, again, I chose to look at that because I knew that my stress level in the last, again, we're just getting to know each other, but I have a daughter that went through close to 9 years of a major eating disorder, and we didn't know if she was going to live, and in and out of treatment. And I raised 4 kids. I started my business from nothing and have thriving wellness business in it. So there all these good things and not so good things just came together in a storm. And then these things that were happening as I'm learning, as I'm hooking up with a functional nutritionist, functional medicine practitioner, and doing the testing and things like that, I'm discovering these other things too about insulin, blood sugar, estrogen dominant, and all of that. Because those kind of things didn't really show up. Like you said, I wasn't having symptoms, but something happened in this perfect storm that led to me having cancer. And so again, I love this approach. Again, it's not for everybody. And I love that you said that. And I'll repeat that again. This isn't for everybody. But as I've done in my business, and I believe you do in yours, like, we just want to educate people, because then you have a choice. When you can learn about what's going on with you, what's going on, what choices there are besides, like you said, this dogma that you've been raised with, that it has to be this way. When you can see and be open to other things, then you have a choice. You can be an educated consumer and make an educated choice on what's best for you. And there's power in that.
Yes. Amen to that. There's so much wisdom. Okay. So the Metabolic Approach to Cancer by Dr. Nasha Winters. I was actually with her this past weekend. She is brilliant. And she had her own stage 4 standard of care center home to die of ovarian cancer when she was 19. She's in her 50s now. I'm not sure exactly how old, but she's gotten herself in remission and been working out this. And so there's 10 areas that she identifies in this book, and I'm certified with her. I work with her. And these areas we can use functional testing to illuminate what's going on, except for the emotional. That one's the separate little guy that we do some more discussion with instead of actual testing. But when you are looking at these, it's never one thing. And this is the thing I just want to pound the drum. It's not one thing. There's usually 7 or 8 things, or like you said, all of them. And the further of a progression, usually the more things there are. But I don't see people with 3. I don't see people with 4. It's a lot of stuff. And that's where I think a lot of times we're missing things. So I require, it's part of my program, everybody test everything. I mean, there are things that we can't test for you at this point in time. Hopefully we'll get better tests down the road. I'm sure we will. But as much as we can, I want all the smoking guns on the table. That way we can step back and say, okay, this needs to be prioritized based on the situation, based on the other things going on. How can we multitask? All that kind of stuff. So the protocols that come out are always 100% personalized, very, very tailored to the individual because like we don't know what's going to show up on the test until we test, which is amazing. This is the part that people aren't talking about with cancer. We know it's a multifactorial issue. We know that it's very bio-individual. I mean, the research has shown this over and over again, but we're still looking for one drug, one cure, one magic bullet. I think every single one of us, and I would agree, I put myself in this boat. I would love it if there was one pill that you could take to get rid of cancer or one drug that you could take around of it. It's never going to exist because it's not the way the body is working. So like you were explaining, when there's all these things out there, it's not just the hormones, it's not just the low vitamin D, it's all of these together that create this perfect storm that overwhelm the immune system because we all have an amazing immune system that's actually designed to address cancer cells. That's part of how our body is created, but it will get overwhelmed if we keep throwing toxins and then give it deficiencies and hormonal imbalances and all this stuff and pile it all on. It gets overwhelmed and distracted and it can't do its job. So I tell people all the time, I do not cure cancer. I just help you discover why you had cancer so that then you can address those issues naturally or not, so that then your body can cure its own cancer. So like for me, I didn't touch the tumor. I wasn't taking special things for the tumor. I was just addressing my body in general and it did its own job, which is a very, very different philosophy. And a lot of alternative practitioners are still just looking for a green way to attract the tumor. And, even when people want to do things holistically, they're looking at it as still like what kills the tumor. And the tumor, I look at it as more of a symptom. So there's so many ways our body tells us there's something wrong, whether it's dots on your fingernails or feeling grumpy at that time of the month or having a tumor. Your body is telling you there's something not right. And the more we can listen to it when it's the little tiny things like spots on the fingernails, the quicker we can turn things around so that you don't have to get to the tumors. And some of us are better at listening to our bodies than others. Some of our bodies are better at connecting with us and telling us these symptoms. Some of us are really good compensators and our body's not saying much. Like, it was telling me I was tired. It's not a real loud scream. And that's okay. It's just now we have tools to help us listen to our bodies better with the functional testing.
Right. Well, and I know that you were saying this, like our cells, and maybe you can explain this maybe better than me. I just try to keep things simple. But, when our cells are designed to detox themselves, right? And that they can, if they're not too overwhelmed, then they can go into this process because we have eating and detoxing and getting rid of the bad stuff, if you will, and the cancer cells or the predisposed cells, to cancer type of thing. Can you, because I know I've read about that with fasting and, a larger fasting window that can, if we give our body that chance, then our body can do that. It can get rid of the stuff, clean itself out, right? And just do that. Again, very simply, maybe you could say that a little bit more scientifically.
This is huge. And I've heard a lot of practitioners say, well, we don't need to do detox because our body already does it naturally. Yes, but like I said, some people suck at it. That would be me. And some people, I shouldn't say some people. All people, we live in a world that is inundated with ridiculous amounts of chemicals and toxins. And I think as consumers, we aren't even aware of how much there is out there. It's scary. In the last 100 years, just 100 years, it has been inundated with things from the sky and the water and the soil and, the EMFs, the magnetic. It's insane. And we don't even have enough ways to test all the chemicals out there. And as soon as we find out, BPA is bad, well, just use BP, do a different bisphenol. And it doesn't make it better. It's really looking at how can we live more simple, clean, whole foods, whole products. But even at that, a lot of times there's still so many things like how many people realize the mold protocols in terms of building codes, the way the buildings are structured, all buildings. They have drywall, which is the perfect substrate to grow mold. And then we hide our water pipes behind there. And it takes about 48 hours for just a couple drips to create mold that then the spores can pass through the drywall and you breathe them in. this is insane. I mean, the Bible actually has a whole chapter on how to deal with mold and how to avoid it. I mean, it was that serious, and it's been around that long.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many more that we are now making chemical wise and such that are just insane. I mean, you look at even just the receipts that we touch, they're full of phytoestrogens and stuff. So if you've got somebody that's touching a lot or just very sensitive or already has some estrogen dominance, I mean, this can just add fuel to the fire. And again, a lot of this stuff is kind of obscure. It's not things people are looking at.
Brought to you by Gorski Wellness and the possibility of a better you. Are you feeling sluggish? Ready for a change? Need more energy? Up for a bigger challenge? I'm Moyra Gorski, retired nurse and wellness advocate. For over 22 years, I've been helping people live healthier lives while making small changes each and every day. Those small changes lead my clients to living a healthier lifestyle with markedly better health. As a brand ambassador for the Shaklee Corporation, the most clinically proven wellness company in the world, I guide my clients to make healthier choices each day with their food, supplements, skincare, workouts, and mindset. They say getting started is half the battle. Let's make healthy happen together. If you're ready for simple, natural, sustainable solutions to feeling and looking your best, let's connect. You'll find a link in the show notes or reach out to me at moyragorski.com. Here's to a better you. It's also something that, again, didn't happen. This didn't develop for me, in the last 8 months, but I do, again, much of the reading that I've done and listening, they talk about like, let's look back on the last 15 months before the diagnosis, like what happened? Like you said something like, 8 months before your diagnosis, right? Is that what you said, that you moved into a house with, sometimes there's that, is it the last straw? I don't know, but it's something that this has been building. And then there's something that's a divorce or stress or job loss or something that's just kind of like, okay, that's it. We're done. And so then it rears its ugly head, if you will.
Exactly. And I hear people say all the time, well, my grandma ate like this and she lived to 100 or whatever. And I'm like, your grandma didn't have all these toxins in her environment that she was dealing with and bombarded with all day long, every day, that she couldn't get away from. Because literally when we went and moved to where we could have our own meat animals, we were living out in rural Idaho. There was no cell phone coverage where I was at. So if you want to get pristine, like it was as pristine as you could get, minus the moldy house, but this is
right.
This is where it gets like there's always something. And there were still toxins and I still couldn't get away from it, even though we were doing all that stuff. So yes, you do detox naturally. What I recommend is, first off, the biggest thing is to get the toxins as much out of your environment as possible. And by testing, you can then see, oh, these are my things that I'm having trouble with. Let's really zoom in on where are those coming in. And a lot of times it's really weird places. The detective work is crazy. I find it fun, but a lot of people get frustrated by it, like trying to figure out where those things are coming from is part of it. So get the inflow to stop. And then just getting into some lovely practices of detox to just encourage the systems that are already in your body to do better and be more efficient. There's certain nutrients that your liver needs to convert toxins to be able to get out. There's binders and things that you can give it to make sure that it's escorted out. Most people, a lot of people have trouble with their detox pathways. So are you pooping well enough, regularly enough? Are you sweating well enough, regularly enough? Those kinds of things. Are toxins able to get out? All those things optimizing make a huge difference, but you don't necessarily need to do crazy protocols that aren't necessarily addressing these things. You just want to stop the inflow, assist the outflow.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Because again, that was one thing that, all of a sudden I heard about coffee enemas. I'm like, oh my God, do I have to start doing a coffee enema? Like I used to do, I worked rehab nursing.
Ever.
I know I've heard that and I am open to perhaps, yes, but I haven't done it yet, but I heard they're awesome. And maybe we can talk about that in a second. But, I worked rehab nursing. And so I did, I worked PM shift and we did bowel programs. I'm like, I've done enough of that, putting things in that area. Like, I don't know if I want to do that. So, but again, very wise words of, again, paying attention to, what we put, what's around us and what we're putting on ourselves with. I don't think women realize how much is in our skincare products, in our personal care items, our makeup. I mean, I know a gal who, she actually joined my wellness team, but she was on TV and she was under the lights and all of that makeup. And she came down with breast cancer, and she attributed it a lot to all of that stuff that she was caking on her skin, in order to make her beautiful so that she could be camera ready. So women just don't pay attention to that. Like all of that stuff that we put on. I learned that when our son had terrible allergies and I was encouraged to change my laundry detergent. I'm like, stop using scrubbing bubbles and I'm like, what? I love scrubbing bubbles. But again, we don't realize that those fragrances and the sudsing agents and those kind of things are all these dangerous chemicals that our body just doesn't know what to do with, and it's just not good for us. So that's good. We got to pay attention to that, stop the inflow and better the outflow. Yeah.
The coffee enemas are one of my favorites. And I will tell you a little secret. The clients that try them, which probably I'd say 80% of my clients do, it's like the cheap and easy way to detox, because that coffee has an palmitic acid in it that stimulates your liver to produce more glutathione, which is like the mama antioxidant the body makes, and to release the bile, which is where it stores the toxins to get excreted out. But the thing people don't talk about that I love is that it stimulates the vagus nerve, the vagal nerve, so that you get into a parasympathetic state. And so most of us cancer people tend to be sympathetic stuck, where we're like, go, 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 go. We're high achievers. We get stuff done, but at what cost? And this was like one of the few things that I have found that actually could get me into parasympathetic, which for those of you who don't know, being in the parasympathetic versus that sympathetic flight or fight, you need to be in parasympathetic in order to heal. So rest, digest, heal, detox, all of those kinds of things need to be in parasympathetic, which is cheap and easy. No big fancy stuff. And once you've done them a couple times, it's usually not a big deal. It is a little weird, but I actually did one this morning. TMI. There you go. But
so did you learn to do it on your own? Or did you go someplace and like be trained, or you just learned to do it on your own with the videos and stuff?
So I was actually on a podcast not long ago, and we talked about coffee enemas, and YouTube took down my video on how to do coffee enemas because they said I was giving medical advice, which made me laugh. But I just I have a video instructional, and no, I'm not naked in it. My daughter was very concerned about that. I just demonstrated with pants on where things go, because it's really, the weird factor is high there. But once you've done it, it's like, oh, that wasn't hard. That's what I hear over and over. That wasn't hard, and I enjoyed that. And why did I enjoy it? That was weird. Why do I because you get in that parasympathetic, it's kind of like
okay. All right. Well, you just gave me I'll look into it again.
Yeah.
Just needed that encouragement.
Absolutely.
So, and I talked about this before we went live. I really want to talk about, again, one of them is one of those terrains is, the way that we eat in our diet. And so I know within the book, they talk about keto as the way to go. And then I've read other things, and Chris Beats Cancer and lots of other, they talk about plant-based, no animal products, and just completely plant-based, plant-centered. I like to say plant-centered because I try not to be an all or nothing kind of girl. So I'm much more plant-centered. And I feel like my blood sugar is I could even realize that and notice that myself, even before I started testing my blood sugar, that I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm at a much better level when I'm eating plant-based. So I'd love for you to address that, because there seem to be those two camps of like, oh, you should be keto or you should be completely plant-based if you're looking at preventing cancer reoccurrence or healing and things like that. So can you address that?
Oh, I would love to address this. This is something particularly near and dear to my heart because, like I said, I went to the vegan side first, and there's a lot of reasons that it's not an option with people with cancer. Now, just to start off, anything is better than the standard American diet. Okay. So when people come from the standard American diet and they go to a vegan diet, yes, they're going to get an upgrade. They will feel better fast. They may even heal depending on what their terrain, other things going on are. So I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying ideally, and especially with more complicated cases and such, like you really want the ketones. So here's the thing. What we're talking about with ketogenic diet, I agree with the vegans that most of the animal products are crap. I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole myself. However, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because what happens is, the way our animals and animal products are created and raised, they've got hormones and antibiotics and pesticides and chemicals and homogenized raw, it's a disaster. That is not the way that we were intended to eat those things. But the good news is we can still resource stuff in the correct state. It's harder. But the beautiful thing, the reason why you'd want to do this is there's several things. But when you say eat carrots, that's like the big thing, especially carrot juice, like in the cancer community, everyone says, oh, you've got to eat that because vitamin A is really, really good for cancer, right? There is no vitamin A in carrots. Just think about that. None. Zero. There's beta carotene, which is a precursor to vitamin A. And about 30% of the population cannot make that conversion to activate it into vitamin A. And you know who that 30% is? It's usually cancer clients. And so that's, one of the things I'm looking at on genetic testing. Can they do that? But even if they can't, let's just back up. So if somebody has cancer, their body is not doing well, to be generic, because I don't know specifically what's not going on. Do we really want to stress their body out and make them do extra work of converting the vitamin A? Wouldn't it be nice to just, here's the vitamin A, go for it? Mm-hmm. I mean, this is just basic logic. So I say thank you. I'm super grateful to those animals for making the vitamin A for me so that my body can just absorb it. Now, for me, I do not eat a lot of animal products. I'm very passionate about the animal products, but it doesn't need to be a lot in terms of meat. But what I am doing is it's very, very clean. So the animals that I eat have a fabulous life, except the last day. And even then, right. They're killed humanely. Yeah, I stole that from Joel Salatin. I think I kind of butchered it. But, literally my cows play in the grass. My kids play with them. It's a delightful life that they get. They get fed ridiculous amounts of yummy green grass that's fast growing. So they're super nutritious and they're happy. And the happiness, it sounds cheesy and tree hugger or whatever, but it's actually important because you don't want an animal that is not only deficient in things, but unhappy because, like we said, the emotions manifest themselves in the tissues. Same for the animals. So it's a really important thing that you take good care of your animals and you get good source food. The other issue is the blood sugar, like you were mentioning. So with the blood sugar, we know from Otto Warburg's Nobel Prize winning work in the 1930s that cancer is a metabolic disease. So when cancer cells become cancerous, the definition of them is that they have shift metabolically so that they are not burning oxygen, they're anaerobic. And this process is super inefficient and they need insane amounts of blood sugar, or what we call glucose. So much so that they will actually send signals out to the body to create new blood vessels, which we call angiogenesis. And the blood vessels are coming to the tumor so that it can get more blood sugar. It needs that fuel in order to grow and divide and proliferate. So when we are not having our blood sugar super, super dialed in, a lot of people, it's okay if your blood sugar is 120, 110. No, it's not. If you have cancer, that is too high. And it needs to be dialed in to 70 to 90 and keep it in that range. And the hemoglobin A1C, it needs to be under 5. It cannot be going lower because you're giving the fuel to the cancer. And we're trying to back that up. Now, the connection with the vegetarian stuff is that, if people are vegetarian and eating eggs and dairy and such, they can get enough protein from those products. But again, a lot of people can't handle egg whites. They're allergic, are sensitive. A lot of people have dairy issues. So that may be an issue there. They want to be vegan. In that camp, I will not take them as a client because I know that they cannot get their blood sugar in a good place because it's so carbohydrate centric. So they're getting their proteins from plants, so from rice and beans and things like that, or worse yet, soy products that are super estrogenic, which nobody should be eating because they are going to promote those hormone imbalances. So it just makes it so the cards are stacked against you in that way. And then the third thing I would say is that they're missing the ketones. So if you're not in a ketogenic state, it's not just the blood sugar. It's really about getting the ketones. There's an amazing wealth of research showing how the ketones have amazing healing properties. And if you're not in a ketogenic state, even if you're eating low carb with meat and good quality meat and everything, you won't get the extra benefits. And we want to get everything we can. So you were talking about autophagy. So that's a fancy word for when you are not digesting food for a period of time. So like you're doing some intermittent fasting or longer fasting, you go into deeper autophagy. Basically, your body is like, okay, I'm not doing this digestion thing. What else do I need to do? Let's go to cleanup mode. Let's clean up some of the junk around here, mingled proteins, rogue cancer cells, all that stuff. And that's when you get some really nice healing benefits. You get very similar things with the ketones going on. So we want to hit both of those every way we can. So systematically helping somebody to clean up the diet and get into ketosis and get deeper and get into autophagy and all those things. Because, when it comes to cancer, we're turning the Titanic around. This is not easy. And that diet has got to be super, super dialed in. And probably people think that means it tastes awful. It doesn't. I am super passionate about it being sustainable and that it tastes good and that you can still, have your cake and eat it too, figuratively and literally. You just have to be strategic and know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that's really confusing now. And a lot of people are saying bold claims and they're making kind of moral thoughts on it and misrepresenting things and not research-based about, these different things. So yes, it has to be dialed in, but it has to be very bio-individual. So for example, there's certain genetic SNPs that, people have that if they have that, like red meat is like eating a candy bar for them. And so I would not have them eat red meat, although they would still be doing animal products. It just wouldn't be the red meat. And so there's really dialing it in to see what's going on specifically for that person that's going to help them move the dial as fast and as much as possible.
Right. Yeah. So I love that. Thank you for that explanation, because that's what, and I told you before we started that I do these podcasts about 50% for me so that I can learn, and I search out the people that I want to learn from. So that's exactly what I'm excited about, because I'm going to be starting next week working with a gal that I know that just finished her doctorate in functional medicine. And that's what I want to do. I said, I've made these changes based on what I've read, what I've listened to, and I've done pretty good so far. But that's what I want to do. I want to dial it in even more to really know what's specific for me. Because I even do that when I talk to people about general, basic nutrition and supplementation. Like if we were the same age, we don't need this. We don't have the same needs. We don't have the same goals. So we wouldn't be taking I wouldn't recommend the same product. So it's the same thing when you look at cancer and other type, with this, like we should be really, if we want to, again, choice, but dial it in specifically, doing some functional testing that, as we say, functional folks, they like to test, not guess. So that's, again, you've mentioned lots of different tests and alluded to different tests. When we can test, we can really figure out what's going on inside of us and then can make that choice of what's going to be the best thing for us. So I'm excited to start with my gal next week, because again, I think I've gotten so far, and then I really know that I want to dial it in a little bit more to really prevent recurrence, which reminds me, as we, wrap up our time together, you have created an ebook to talk about just that thing of how to, if you're a cancer patient and you want to, because that's where I'm at, it's where you're at, many people are at, however they got to that point, they're at a point where they want to prevent reoccurrence. So you did create something that you're going to share with our guests, my guests here, but tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. My ebook is called The Roadmap to Prevent Cancer Recurrence. And it's going over all the different areas that we've talked about a little more in depth of which test and how this works together to really see why you have cancer. Now, this is the same process that I use when people have cancer as post. So a lot of my clients, they come to me, they've got stage 2, whatever, or they are coming and they did standard of care. And now they realize like, oh, this didn't address the why. And is it going to come back? Because they start to understand that if the soil that grew the original this soil that grew the original cancer isn't addressed, why wouldn't the cancer grow right back?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're seeing over and over and over again. When we cut out the cancer or, address it some other way, it just comes back. Now it might be 5, 10, 15 years, but again, we want to address the reason why at the root.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that will be in the show notes that you can pick that up. And that's, again, it sounds like a great tool that people can pick up and take a look at. And then again, make those choices, because as I've talked about on this podcast so many times, if we can have things in our tool belt, that work for us, then we've got those things that can help us get along, in life. I've talked a lot about addictions and eating disorders and, things to help bring us joy and things like that. It's the same thing with this, having those tools in our tool belt. If it's coffee enemas or, going and sitting in your sauna, or, we are cleaning through our house. We have a beautiful home that we raised 4 children in. And I am so, like my husband said, for the last few years, we should move. I'm like, no, it's fine. I'm telling you, after I got a diagnosis, I went to Michigan for a couple of days by myself and stayed in a lovely place by myself. And I came home like, okay, we're going to sell our house this year, because it's just time to give somebody else this home to fill it with children, raise their kids. And I'm looking for a small home. I'd love to have chickens when you talk about like raising cattle and things like that, I think of my mother who told us that when she was in high school, her father, my grandfather, decided that he wanted to buy a farm. And so they were in Michigan, but they bought an 80-acre farm and went and lived and raised cattle and sent Bessie to town, once a year. And then they ate grass-fed, farm-raised beef for the year. And my mother was a avid gardener because she learned to garden. And when we live off of the fat of the land, if you will, like you said, humanely raising our animals and, again, learning to grow our tomatoes and things like that, it's a wonderful way to live. I mean, my grandfather, he did develop diabetes, but it was later in his life. He lived a healthy life, even though he was a little overweight. I mean, I'm getting a little off topic, but it just reminded me of that farm life. And I love the fact that you've been able to get to a place where you can raise the things that can be self-sustaining, sustaining for you. I have a girlfriend the very girlfriend that introduced me to that book, she lives in Paris. They've moved out to the countryside and they developed, I'm not really sure the name of it, but basically one of those societies, one of those where they're living off the fat of the land. They're like, what is it called? Maybe you can help me with the name of it, but it's like this ecosystem that they live and they all participate and they grow their food and they, take baths in the pond and, all those kind of things, that they're living this beautiful natural life on their own without all these other things.
It's a beautiful thing. And the wonderful thing is, because that's not for everybody. Not everyone wants chickens or whatever. And I get that. But the idea that we can order from some of these companies and get it frozen, sent to our door is awesome, because it doesn't have to be like you have to live in a certain place and know a farmer or something anymore.
No, that's the thing. I've been looking into it. I've been calling my friends and saying, okay, what farms do you use? Where can I find these? Because, again, sometimes we don't want to we just need some options. And there are options. And I appreciate you saying that, because there are options if you look into it. And if you do want to continue to eat eggs, you can find, humanely raised chickens that hatch these beautiful, eggs and things like that. So, as for the sake of time, let's wrap things up today. Again, I so appreciate this. This has been great for me, and I know it's wonderful for the audience too. I really appreciate all of your knowledge that you shared. But I would love for you to tell people where they can find you, and just any last words that you'd like to share with my audience today.
Oh, absolutely. So my website is cancerfreedom.com, cancerfreedom.com. I am on Instagram. It's just my name, Katrina Foe. And then on Facebook, It's Nutritional Pilates, which is the name of my book. But I would love to hear people if they have thoughts or want to reach out on this, because it's really important to me that people understand that, they can be doing all this stuff and eating healthy and not have symptoms and still get cancer. And there are lots of tools out there. There are more choices than they realize. So just want people to know they have options.
Yeah, that's really good. And that's what I've told a couple of my friends who've reached out to me who got a diagnosis after mine. And I said, that's what I've heard from this community, is that just like Dr. Jen Simmons, she said, you can just relax. You can take a deep breath. I mean, I cried when I heard her podcast for the first time and she shared about her story, and because it offered me that hope that I could take a breath and I could do my learning just like you did. You could do your learning, your research, get your team together and figure out what you want to do for yourself. And we don't have to be so afraid, again, unless you have some inflammatory and, other types of, pretty significant cancers, if you will. We do have time. And that's what you're saying, Katrina. That's what I'm saying is do your research and figure out what works for you. It is your choice. And knowing that you do have choices, I think is one of the messages that I continue to put out there, is that you do have a choice. And the more that you can learn, the better choices that you can make. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thanks for being with me today. So appreciate it. Thank you, audience, for listening. Please share this with someone who may want to hear this or need to hear this. And again, keep coming back as I continue to share ways that we can be on a beautiful journey of life. We deserve to live a joyful life, and there are ways to do that. And so again, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Hey there, ready to live a more joyful life? Considering connecting with someone who can help you? If so, I'd like to be that person. I offer a free consultation where we determine where the chaos is in your life and how you can learn to bring more joy each and every day. Visit my website, MoyraGorski.com, or simply email me, Moyra@MoyraGorski.com, with more joy in the subject line. I look forward to connecting, and I'm here to say there will always be some chaos, which requires a little juggling, but you can find joy and live your life intentionally filled with that joy. Let me help you on your journey to joy. And that's joy, the journey of you.